She is a woman of unparalleled achievement, towering intellect, sterling credentials, and unyielding loyalty to the Constitution, Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
I never imagined that I would find myself in this position. But now that I am, I assure you that I will meet the challenge with both humility and courage.
President Donald Trump named Chicago Area District Court Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Now the race is on for Republicans to get a confirmation before Election Day. Good morning. Welcome to WGN-TV Political Report. I'm Paul Lisnick. We begin this morning in Washington. Just over a week after the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, President Donald Trump took to the White House Rose Garden to nominate her replacement. Now, Amy Coney Barrett was named to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals based in Chicago back in 2017. She's been a professor at Notre Dame Law School since 2002. Before that, she held a private practice in D.C., clerked for Justice Antonin Scalia about 20 years ago. Barrett is a devout Catholic conservative judge who vows not to let her faith get in the way of justice.
The President has nominated me to serve on the United States Supreme Court, and that institution belongs to all of us. If confirmed, I would not assume that role for the sake of those in my own circle, and certainly not for my own sake. I would assume this role to serve you. I would discharge the judicial oath, which requires me to administer justice without respect to persons, do equal right to the poor and rich, and faithfully and impartially discharge my duties under the United States Constitution.
Barrett is Trump's third nominee for the Supreme Court in just 4 years, giving the court a rare 6-3 conservative supermajority. If confirmed, the 48-year-old Barrett will be the first justice with school-aged children to sit on the Supreme Court. Democrats already attacking the nominee and the timeline. Both of the senators from Illinois, also both Democrats, had strong reactions to yesterday's announcement. Junior Senator Tammy Duckworth already vowing to vote no when the time comes, saying in part, "The stakes could not be higher. If Republicans insist on confirming Judge Barrett, the court could roll back women's reproductive rights, greenlight more dark money in politics, jeopardize voting rights and civil rights for black and brown communities, and knock down any progress on climate action." Judge Barrett was not fit to be a circuit judge in 2017, and she's the wrong choice for a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court today. Once again, she will not have my support. Now, Senator Dick Durbin sits on the Judiciary Committee. He'll have the chance to question Judge Barrett next month. He did not commit to a no vote yesterday, instead releasing a statement saying, "We are 38 days from Election Day. We are 45 days from the Supreme Court taking up the case that will decide whether the Affordable Care Act will survive." President Trump and Majority Leader McConnell want to rush Judge Barrett's nomination through the Senate before those two dates arrive. What's at stake with this nomination is the fate of affordable quality health care and pre-existing conditions protections for millions of Americans. Of course, the Republican-controlled Senate doesn't need Durbin, Duckworth, or any other Democrat to vote to confirm the nominee. Hearings slated to start October 12th. I've got two legal experts joining me this morning to discuss what comes next. Juliette Sorensen is a clinical professor of law at Northwestern University. She's also the executive director of the nonprofit investigative journalism organization Injustice Watch. And Michael Conway, an adjunct lecturer at Northwestern and retired partner at Foley and Lardner. He served as counsel to the House Judiciary Committee during the Nixon administration. And good morning. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Juliette, let me start with you. You know, there's been all this back and forth about Republicans saying, you know, that we couldn't do this in 2016, but now it's different, and we have a president and Senate of the same party, all this kind of stuff. All of those back and forth between the parties about what makes this right and wrong, does any of it even matter? Bottom line is Republicans have the power, right?
That's correct. The debate about the timing of a nominee does not exist anywhere in the Constitution. It doesn't exist in the Judiciary Act of 1789. And the first time that it was ever discussed by the Senate Majority Leader and the Judiciary Committee following his leadership was back in 2016 when President Obama nominated Merrick Garland.
So, Michael, with hearings getting underway on October 12th, that'll take 4 days. It is clear at this point, I think, that they look for a vote confirmation to happen before Election Day. What are your senses, either of the legal or political consequences of a vote happening before or after November 3rd?
Well, I think there are big political consequences, both for the Democrats and the Republicans. Mitch McConnell might very much want to keep his majority intact by postponing a vote into the lame duck section of the Congress, which is after the election and before the new Congress is seated in January. That way he could spare some of his Republican colleagues who are in tight races like in Colorado and Maine and Arizona from having to vote. But President Trump wants the vote to come before the election because he wants Judge Barrett to be on the Supreme Court in case some challenge to the voting process goes to the court. He wants to pick the judge to rule on his case.
Well, that is the perfect comment to take me to my next line of questions, because you are constitutional law experts, and that's what we need to talk about, issues that a Justice Barrett might very well face. Juliet, let me come back to you. The president has made it clear he wants 9 justices on the court because he anticipates Election Day challenges to make their way to the court. So if you're Justice Barrett, now that we know that's on the table, does she have to recuse herself? Should she recuse herself? What does she do?
Justice Barrett will no doubt toe the line that she's already articulated, which is to say that she will set aside personal beliefs, that she is guided by constitutional principles, and that she will uphold them in impartially doing the duties of a judge. Is it actually possible to set aside the fact that the individual who nominated you for the nation's highest court is an incumbent president anticipating these legal challenges? I believe in theory it is possible, although it may honestly be challenging at some type of subliminal or emotional level. That said, the president has made it quite clear, and I'm sure he has communicated this to his advisors, that any nominee that he puts forward, he would expect some loyalty from.
Michael, you were of counsel during the Watergate days, so you understand the notion of public unrest, people being concerned about things. So if Justice Barrett does step into Election Day related questions and, let's say, helps decide them in favor of President Trump, who appointed her, should we expect, what kind of public reaction should we anticipate to that kind of decision?
Well, I think the president has already fueled that fire by saying that he won't promise a peaceful transition if he loses the election. We all remember Bush v. Gore in 2000, and Al Gore really allowed the country to go forward by accepting the court's vote. But I think Chief Justice Roberts doesn't want the court in the middle of this. Now, before, when he was the swing vote, he could control it. But he may not be able to control this, and I think there'll be great dissatisfaction if it looks like the Supreme Court majority with new Justice Barrett puts Trump back in office.
Juliet, clearly this justice will face the Affordable Care Act issue when it comes up on November 10th. We'll have a decision in that. She has indicated before she doesn't agree with Chief Justice Roberts' approach to how he saved it. But is this a new case with different issues this time around, or can we pretty much predict that she would knock down the act?
So the Affordable Care Act, as you indicated, has made its way to the Supreme Court before. It survived, albeit with part of it carved out. And it seems that Republicans are determined to either invalidate it in total or continue to chip away at it. It would come to court as a new case or controversy, and really it's extremely difficult to predict the approach that justices would take. I expect that it will be highly fact specific, as the Sebelius case was the last time it made its way. Michael,
what sense do you have? You know, it's one thing to publish papers, have opinions about various issues, but then you become a justice on the Supreme Court and you vote on these things. Through your decades of experience, any sense of how a justice's personal views, we know she's very religious and all that, does that come into play in making decisions, or are judges and justices able to put those aside and basically adhere to the law?
We're all human. And even if the justice says that she's putting it aside, those beliefs still underlie her whole philosophy. I think it's very, very difficult. Now, I also think the Democrats would be making a big mistake if they challenge in the hearings Judge Barrett on the grounds of her Catholic faith. They could very easily turn off the voters. But I do believe that it will be there. She'll try to avoid it. But I'm just afraid she's already said once in testimony or writings that a Catholic judge would have a hard time imposing the death penalty, and she would have to recuse herself. So she's already indicated in some circumstances that her faith would affect her ability to rule at all.
Julia, just a few seconds. So you want to chime in on that, how a justice's beliefs affect their decisions?
So there are two sets of beliefs that we're looking at here. One is her personal religious beliefs. One is her personal political beliefs. I believe that both can come into play and influence a person's state of mind. I don't believe that we should make any assumptions about religious beliefs being somebody's guiding principle, although Judge Barrett has said that she regards Justice Scalia, whom she clerked for, as her mentor. And Justice Scalia was certainly, like Judge Barrett, a devout Catholic, and spoke fervently of his faith.
Yeah.
I don't want to draw conclusions about that, nor do I want to draw conclusions about her being a woman with school-age children. And I do want to clarify one point you made at the outset, Paul. She is not the only would-be Supreme Court justice with school-age children. There are other Supreme Court justices who have had them in the past, including current Justice Kavanaugh. She would be the only woman justice who has ever taken the bench with school-age children.
Thanks for that clarification. Professor Juliet Sorensen, Michael Connolly, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And coming up next on WGN TV Political Report.
The decision on who takes the seat for Justice Ginsburg affects every single family in America and thousands of families in Illinois.
Democrats sound the alarm over the impact President Trump's nominee could have on Illinois. But can they do anything to stop the process from moving forward? I'm talking with Congressman Mike Quigley when we come back. And later, Republicans in Springfield will not get their chance to question House Speaker Mike Madigan this week. Hear the defiant letter from the Speaker. Stay with us.